Hi everyone, I'm back with Dr. Justin Brink, and today we're going to be doing some mobility movements on your wrists because there's two major points that you have contact with your bike, and that's through your feet, which we already did, and now we're going to cover wrists.
Yes, we are. All right, so today we're going to be talking about more of our wrist motion. So very similar to the ankle, we're going to be doing, it's called wrist cars, which is again controlled articular rotations. And my goal here is I want to be able to control the biggest range of motion that my wrist has. There's the active and there's the passive, right? So if you took your hand here and we pressed it back and we wanted to see sort of how I could flex my wrist, or extend my wrist, one way or the other, that's sort of where you're testing your passive range of motion. Now we're going to test the active, okay? So what I'll tell people here is, so hand's going to come out straight, right? And then you're going to tip it as far back as we can go. And I take them through just 4 planes of motion to begin with. And when you're doing this, you may feel a lot of this like wrist extensors back here really firing, right? I also want you to open up those fingers, because when you get the fingers to open, you're going to get all the muscles inside your hand here to really start to kick in too. You'll feel a difference with a flat hand or fingers open. And you'll feel that in your forearm too. The more you open the fingers, the more the forearm is going to have to work. Yeah. Right? So if I keep these fingers open, from wrist extension here, I now want to go into wrist flexion, right? And so how we can also test, right? And you can sort of see how she's here, but if I take this wrist and I start to move it more, you can see how much more motion she's got out of her wrist, right? This is where I want her to have more ownership over that range, right? So when we can start to train more of that motion and then we can push it, we can hold that, we know our active is getting closer like to equaling what our passive is. Okay, so as you go to here, right? So you're gonna go all the way into wrist flexion, perfect. Now let's go to pinky side. So as we go to pinky side here, you're really trying to pull, but as you're pulling, what we don't want to see is the forearm moving. Forearm has to stay put, right? So as I'm moving here, you can see that my forearm here isn't doing much movement at all. But for some, we want to turn, right? Now that's elbow motion. I want wrist motion, right? So we go into full flexion here, and then I'm going to go into pinky side, and I'm going to pull it down into extension. We're going to go to thumb side. Thumb side doesn't have a lot of motion at all. And then we're going to try and pull all the way back up into wrist flexion again. Okay. Right? For those of you that have like a harder time, you can always put your cell phone right here on your forearm. So when you go through that motion, we do a clockwise and a counterclockwise motion. As you're going through like this clockwise motion, if you're doing that and your forearm wants to rotate, your phone's going to fall. Okay. Right? So this is a great way to see like what your active range of motion is, because now you have an object that you have to keep on your forearm.
Okay. Would I ever want to like assist to like bend it more? I want to do it all
can.
My own power?
Yes, like a great question, right? So if we want to go into an assist, like I could always pull you here and then say, okay, squeeze all of that forearm right there as hard as you think you can, right? And I'm going to start to let go, and I just want to see, can you hold it, right? And if you start and you start to see that hand come out, then that just goes back into the strength that you have at your end range. Okay. How does this plan to account for, for cycling, right? Or mountain biking, right? Think about when we fall, right? What positions do our wrists go into? We don't know, right? And since we don't know where our wrists are going to go, we want to have as much control and strength as we can in any position that we get into, so we have less risk for injury.
Yeah, so this is stretching and strengthening at the same time.
At the same time. Okay. Yeah. So like when you do go into this flexion position, we are fully strengthening at the shortest range possible all of like your wrist flexors, but we're also stretching all of our wrist extensors, but we're making them work hard. Okay. And then same thing over here. And then again, just put it together in one big clockwise or counterclockwise circle, each one taking anywhere from 5 to 15 seconds. Just depends on, how much time you have.
Would it be better to do one hand alone or at the same time?
Depends on how good you are.
Okay, I feel like I had a hard time concentrating on both.
Yes, so if you can do one at a time, do one at a time, left to right, right to left, whatever you want to do. If you feel good, then you can start doing both of them at the same time. And I'm going fast, right? But when you really get the wrist to warm up, go slow. Okay. Right? Have more of an intent as to what you're trying to get to. Okay. We're going to be focusing today on a little bit more of wrist extension. We want to make sure how strong can we get here on our wrist extensors, right? So the easiest way is, as we put our wrist here on the floor, you can do one at a time, you can do both at a time. So same thing we did in the wrist cars. We want to open up these fingers as wide as we can get here. So as we're really trying to work on how wide the fingers can get, like I'll tell people between the thumb and the pinky, try and get those to separate. The other part is can I get my forearm, right, to start the crease, start to face forward. Okay. Right, so as you're doing this, you're going to feel like your forearm just wind up, right? Okay. And as you're feeling that forearm wind up, The next phase here is as April starts to lean forward, she's going to go as far forward as her wrists will sort of let her. And for some people, they may not have, great wrist extension, so it's going to be limiting for them. This is where like push-ups or exercises that create wrist extension might create a little bit more of a problem. So now as we get to her end point between left and right side, I'm going to have her now start to push her fingers through the floor.
Okay.
So now as she's pushing her fingers, we can go from 0% all the way up to 100% effort, just depending on sort of how we're working with this. But for, example's sake here, let's just have you go to about 20% effort, whatever you think that is.
Okay.
And just let me know when you hit 20%.
All right.
Okay, perfect. So then as she's at 20%, we are now maximally shortening her extensors, but maximally lengthening the flexors over here. And now she's making them work under some degree of like resistance. Now we can flip the script here, and I can say, keep your wrists right where you're at, keep your forearm right where you're at, but now try and lift your fingers off the ground. Again, they're not going to go anywhere, which is okay, right? But now she's really working her wrist extensors at the shortest position possible, and she's getting her wrist flexors to work at its longest position possible.
Yeah.
And if we want to start to go, or if we want to go back to like the active versus passive, we can see that I can lift her finger here off the floor. So we know that she has more ability to actually move through this finger. And I can make you work hard by saying, all right, squeeze whatever you think you need to squeeze and keep this here off the ground. Because I'm going to let go, and I want you to hold and hold and hold and hold and hold. And you can see just how hard that is to work, through that tissue. Mm-hmm. And again, that's that end range control that we want you to get into.
Okay.
That's when we fall, right?
Yeah.
We get our bodies into these end range positions that we really have to work into. And those are things that we want to make you stronger at. Exercise 3. All right, so same position that we were just in a second ago, except now we're just going to reverse it. So as you sit here, right, if you make just like a little diamond with like your hands.
Right.
Yep. So you're just going to, face them just like that. Yep, there we go. Perfect.
Just like
right? Yeah. So as we're here, right, and I'm pushing down, same sort of thing is we want to see some movement through our forearms, right? So I want to be able to move the crease of my forearm as my hand is into wrist extension. Wrist flexion.
Okay.
So as we're going into wrist flexion here, right, now my extensors, right, are at maximal stretch. Same sort of thing. We want to open up the fingers as wide as we can get them, right? So spread those fingers out, right? Really try and get your elbow to move forward, right? And again, it should be able to freely move. If we feel a lot of restriction, then think about, just life. Why is my forearm tight? Why is my elbow tight? Why is my wrist so tight, right? Mm-hmm. Now from here, same thing as we did in the previous exercise is draw those fingers and pull them down into the ground.
Yeah.
So now as you pull into the ground, now we are working maximal wrist flexion and we're working maximal wrist, extension. So one side we're getting to work, under some degree of load. Other side is more stretch. Mm-hmm. Then we reverse that trend as we get to, let's say, 20%, right? And then our goal here is can we make a fist, right? Really here at these index fingers, right? The index fingers are the ones that we really want to try and work at. And a lot of people are going to get stuck way out here because they're never working on strength of, these fingers at this end range position. But think about where your hand is at. When you're holding on, right, to the handlebars here, what finger is on the brakes? Mm-hmm. Right? And we're always working here. But now all of a sudden, you're having a harder time trying to lift that index finger.
I am, yeah.
But we can get you to move, right? And we can really get it to go there. And you're going to feel that really have to work into that tissue. Yeah. So as you get better with this movement, right, now we have more control over whatever our tissue is actually going to do.
That is the hardest finger to do too.
Yeah, and you'll really feel that stretch and that contractibility, through that tissue.
Yeah, I didn't realize just how much mobility I'm lacking there.
Yeah, right, and that's a lot of people.
Yeah,
it's very common because no one ever wants to work on their wrists.
Right.
Right, and then again, when we're exposed to having these wrist conditions, then no one wants to work on it because now it's said, holy smokes, my wrists are bad, and that's going to take some time to make them better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. That'll be good for me. I can really feel it. I could really feel that my wrists have been neglected because some of those were hard to do. So it's really great to know that I do need to work on it. And I thought I had better range, but I guess not. Yeah. So hopefully this will be something you can add into your routine as well. And you'll also find that maybe you need to work on it. And I will see you on the next one that we do.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
You said I'll lift this finger. It's dead. So I'm going to pull it down into the ground. And then curl up and off the ground.